All right. So, as Brian said, my name is I think Dustin. Is that right, Brian?
Yes.
My name is Dustin Thorstensen. I'm actually based out of Des Moines. Matt actually reached out to me a couple years ago now, I think, right?
Yeah, like 4 or 5 years ago.
God, it's been a while now. Yeah. I run the Iowa.NET user group in Iowa, in Des Moines. And Matt came over and we had lunch a couple of times and he visited some of our meetings and just kind of wanted to see how we were doing things, and then got to run into each other at some other conferences as well. So still been talking, and I said, hey, I'm in Omaha now. So I'm actually an agile coach over at TD Ameritrade. I was going to say TD America, but it's kind of bad when you don't know your company name, right? So I was really happy that I was in town and be able to share some of this. So the talk that we're giving tonight, that I'm giving, is called Failure-Driven Development. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, and very early on, I came across a mantra. An expert is someone who knows all points of failure in a given realm. An expert is someone who knows all points of failure in a given realm. Now, you could try to Google that like I had, and you might not find any direct hits on it. So I'm guessing what happened is I heard it at one point, and I kind of morphed it into my own thing. Somebody smarter than me and more famous than me probably said it, and they probably said it better. But that's kind of the mantra that I've been living under for quite a while. As I mentioned, I know Matt, so I know some of the different leads of user groups in the area. I like talking at local user groups, and I've been at Heartland Developers Conference and KCDC and Nebraska Code and Iowa Code Camp. Got to be on podcasts for .NET Rocks. Every time that you're involved with these activities, you end up getting a bunch of people together. And usually what they like to talk about is their failures. You get the war stories out. So for a lot of years, I was giving talks on coding aspects and everything. And then I started switching over to some career talks because I realized that there's kind of a vacancy or an opening for some career-based talks. And sometimes talking about things that we might not present in front of a group or share some knowledge other people might have. So that's kind of the basis for what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to be sharing a lot of stories, a lot of anecdotes. They're not all my failures. When I was younger, my mom got mad at me because I was stubborn and I had to fail my own way. I couldn't listen to her. As I got older, I realized I can start learning from somebody else's failures and try to avoid those things. And I've learned that it's not necessarily that you know how to do something, it's knowing what not to do. So once you identify all these things that you're not supposed to do, you find a path that, okay, these things might work, but let's avoid these other things because they're going to hurt. One of my friends, Javier Lozano in Des Moines, and I were having a conversation one night, and we were joking about what Maslow's hierarchy of developers' needs would look like. And when I was getting this presentation put together, I was going through a lot of the stories that I've experienced in my life and some of the good stories I've heard from other people. I called up some friends and said, hey, talk to me. What are the lessons that you've learned? And what was going to be a slide in the presentation, I realized soon is actually the framework of the presentation that I'm going to give. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is something that I learned about in college, but I went for programming, so it was one of those required courses you have to take that's never really going to have any effect on my career because I'm dealing with code. And I came back to that and realized, Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about why people do things. You have psychological things that you need to do. And then you can start taking care of these next things, and then the next things, and the next things. So safety is where a lot of us start off at. You're not going to worry about how many likes on Facebook you get for your meal that you took a picture of if you don't get to eat that meal. You're not going to worry about your reputation if you're dealing with eviction or trying to find a job. So I'm going to follow some of these same needs. And again, we build on them. Once you have your core needs, you build on top of that till you get to the point of that self-actualization, where you're really kind of able to fully explore yourself and use all the tools that you have, right? Be the best you that you can be. With that, there are failures that come at each level. So you might be trying to do something for a certain reason, and there's some failures that can come along with that. So that's going to be the basic framework of this talk. Has anybody heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Has anybody ever thought that it actually matters and that has any? Okay, good. It's kind of funny, like everything. Once you learn about something, you're like, oh, wow, I can see it in a lot of places. All right. With this presentation, we're looking at about an hour and a half. The base needs is the biggest part of the pyramid, so we're probably going to be spending about a half hour down there. If you have questions, feel free to throw them out there. If you want more pizza, feel free to walk out. Law of 2 feet applies. If you want to treat this like a Lutheran church, feel free to get out after 1 hour. We're all adults here. All right. So to start off with our basic needs, and you're going to recognize that I'm going to have a couple of stretches, right? So if you're a purist and you've really studied Maslow, you're going to look at some of the things I have and like, that's not right. But for what we're talking about here, we're going to apply that. So the basic needs of a software developer or any kind of employee, right? I've got some different stories where we talk about rate. Bill rate, the pay rate, and work rate. I've been an independent consultant for the last 8 years, so a lot of this talk is probably going to be skewed towards that. How many of you guys are full-time employees? All right, how many contractors? How many people looking to switch jobs in the near future? There you guys go. So as a contractor, I find myself looking for jobs more frequently, so there's certain things that I run into more often. So bill rate. What are some of the failures that we can have when we talk about our bill rate, how much we're going to get paid? And it doesn't matter if we're talking about hourly or salary. We all are going to run into some of these problems. And if we run into problems at this level, they can be kind of devastating because they can be set up very early and hard to overcome later on. So if you can avoid the mistakes early, you might have some successes later. When I first decided to go consulting, I started talking to a lot of people. Talked to the people who are already contracting and tried to understand what they were doing. Tried to understand what the market rates were. And when I was talking to one of my friends, David Reisner, he told me, never underestimate how much money somebody is willing to throw at you. And I found that to be a really weird thing. I was just trying to figure out how much to get paid, not what my ceiling really was. And that seems like an odd thing, but I realized that in certain situations, you have to take a look, not necessarily at what the market price is that you're doing, but what is the problem that you're trying to solve for somebody else. And I've been giving this talk for a couple of years, and it was actually after I started this talk that I ran into this myself and found that, wait a second, I need to listen to my own advice. Somebody called me up. It was a former neighbor of mine. And he goes, Dustin, I need your help. We got this project. We need to get it done. We need to get this data to these people because they're going to basically save our company millions of dollars a year. So he's not talking to me to try to figure out what my hourly rate is. He's talking to me because he needs a problem solved. And that problem is worth money. I'll circle back to that in a minute here. So never underestimating how much people are willing to pay you, essentially. Robbed. My first consulting gig started at the same time as some other guy. We'll call him Mike. Mike and I were on the same team. We came into that position from different angles, though. I had been looking at this new job for a while. Mike had not. Mike found himself unemployed suddenly, with bills, and a wife and kids. And he was worried about that. So he started looking around for help, and he found a guy, we'll call him Robert, who says, Mike, I understand your problems. I want to help you out. So I helped Mike find a job, and Mike was very happy. Mike had enough money now as income to pay for his mortgage and to take care of the credit cards and to feed the kids and all those types of things. 6 months after he started that contract, he switched over to being full-time, and he came back to me and he goes, Dustin, I'm so happy. I got a full-time job. I've got my security now. He goes, and I'm making more money. All right, so I'm going to talk about a couple of numbers here. So there's 2,080 hours in a year. And this is, if you're doing contract, and this is one of these numbers that you kind of get used to. You figure if I take 2 weeks off a year, 2 weeks of vacation, we're at 2,000 hours. All right? So when I take a look at how much a gig might be worth or how much work might be worth, I take the bill rate per hour, multiply it by 2,000. It's not perfect math, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb, right? So $10 an hour is $20,000 a year. So if you're trying to make those comparisons between the hourly wage and the annual salary, pretty good, right? $10 an hour job, 20,000 bucks a year, something that many of us would struggle to take care of. I also started thinking a little bit about how some companies will hire people. Now, if you look around the room, you're going to see a bunch of different people here. And you might know some of the people, and you might know like who the best people are and who's strong in certain areas. But you don't really know who's who. You don't really know who's worth what. And companies really don't either. So when you work for a company, a lot of times they're going to look at developers just like other resources. I know what the servers cost when I spin up an instance at Amazon. It's that flat fee. And a lot of times companies are going to have positions that they need to fill, and they just have that range, right? They're not going to spend a lot of time getting to know you and really identifying what your strengths and weaknesses are and really fine-tuning with a lot of precision on what financial value you're worth. They just kind of look at developers and say, okay, I need another server, need another server, need another server, and this is the rate that they're willing to pay. In certain cases, they might need somebody with a certain level of expertise, so they're willing to pay more. For example, a random server might be good enough for all that batch ETL stuff that we do overnight, but I've got this one process which is rendering some really complex objects and images. So I might need something that has a stronger GPU processor. I'm going to have to pay more for that. That'll happen sometimes. For the client that we were working, I knew that they had this range. And you might be able to go up and above it, but it was really right in this area here. I also happen to know what the average salary was for developers. So long story short, I'm taking a look at the position that this guy got as a full-time developer, and we'll say he's in the $60,000 to $80,000 range. And then realizing that he was actually, if he made more money off of that, he's probably getting paid in the $30 to $40 an hour range. But I knew that this company was paying much more than that across the board because I talked to a lot of people. And most people I talk to, we share that information so we have an understanding of what the market is. So in this scenario, Mike's friend Robert recognized what Mike needed, and he gave him that. And at that point, Robert was taking about 50% of Mike's bill rate. But Mike didn't know enough to ask for that and to be able to have that conversation. So the moral of the story is, don't let Robert take half your bill rate. Had Mike had better conversations and had better knowledge about what he was getting into, he could have some good conversations, and he would have found something that's fair. That's not to say that a recruiter who's placing you at some place does not deserve a rate. That's not it at all. Right? We can talk about risk later and opportunities. They earn their money. They have a very important function in the job. But you also have to understand that there's some people that you might not be able to trust as well. There are companies in your town and my town, which once they have that, what's the word I'm looking for? The markup rate. Once they have that, they can't lose that. So even if Mike later on decided, I need a raise, the only way that Mike would get a raise is if they asked the client to pay that amount more, because they still had to keep that 50% margin. If they lost that margin, then that would be a ding against the person, right? So these are some good things to know. And again, I'm not diversified. I'm not trying to rip on you guys. There are people out there which are a little unscrupulous in that area. And those are some things that they do. And if you're not aware of that, if you're not talking to people and having that understanding, you're going to set yourself up for a really bad situation very early, and that's very difficult to get out of. So how do you get that information? How do you know what's legitimate? at Nebraska Code Camp a couple of years ago at the speakers dinner. I was talking to one of the speakers, and he goes, "Oh yeah, you're from Iowa. I met you there." He goes, "So I was going to go to Iowa Code Camp last year, and I brought a lot of money along, because my plan was I was going to get all the speakers drunk, and then I was going to get them to tell me how much money they make." And I looked over at Adam. I go, "Adam, what are you billing at now?" He goes, "$1.25." And the guy just looked at me. It's like, "What?" Well, Adam and I might be in different markets, but we're still doing the same kind of work. And by Adam telling me what he's billing at, that allows me to understand the market better. Full-time positions, sometimes they might not do that as much, but sometimes contractors will talk about what's acceptable, what is the range, right? How much is too much when you're asking for things? I had somebody help me get a job, and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to tell you that they're not going to pay more than this." I knew my friend was making this, but he goes, "They're not going to pay more than this," because he happened to see a spreadsheet with the budget on it. So I went in for that interview, and it went well. I was recommended. And then she says, "All right, things are going good, so what is it going to take for you to get here?" And I said, "Well, my current client is paying here." And she goes, "I can do that." It was $6 an hour more than what my friend said they were going to pay, which is how much per year? 6 times 2,000. $12,000. That's not nothing. However, I only said what my current client was paying me. I didn't go for the $10 an hour, but what my friend said they were paying. Because that move could have made me $20,000 a year extra. Not a bad thing. I was happy with what I got. But the negotiation side of things is something that we're not really good at. We're really good. I mean, developers develop. That's what we love to do. But there's a business side of it as well. And we have to kind of be aware of that and recognize some of those moments and not necessarily take advantage of them, but make sure that you don't look back on that and say, "Oh, God, I really messed that up. I wish I would have done better on it." Because we all have. And once you do that, it's hard to come back around. Another side of that is we all know where we're good, but if I have a conversation with you guys and talk about how do you rate yourself, you're probably going to be focusing on the things that you're not as strong on. And we all have it. There's so much out there. I might not be as strong on the database side, or I might not be as strong on the JavaScript side, and you're going to start dinging yourself for that. Again, the clients are going to be paying these rates regardless. The first thing I recommend is have a good relationship with the person who's helping you find a job. And the recommendation I was given was just be transparent. Recognize that there's a percentage rate that they can take off your rate or your bill rate, which is totally acceptable. They deserve to be compensated. They're doing some really important work for you. But it's okay to talk about what that is. My friend got a job, and she didn't really feel, it was her first contracted gig, and she didn't really feel like she was, that great, because she knew the things that she wasn't strong at. So she came out and gave a $50 an hour bill rate. Even though I knew from friends that the client was paying a lot more than that. She, I love this one. She's figuring this all out, waiting to get the contract signed. I think she emailed the placement agent and said, "Oh, by the way, I live downtown and this is outside of town. I don't have a car. I'm going to need $58 a month for a bus pass." No problem. Next day, the contract comes back, $58 an hour. How much per year of difference is that? $16,000. Again, that's not nothing. And I'm not telling you guys this so you say, "Wait a second, why am I full-time? I got to get out of here." And probably the biggest thing was that blink test. When you're having those negotiations, if I give you a number and you don't blink, the number I gave was probably lower than what you were expecting, and I just missed an opportunity. So to go back to that client that said, "Hey, we really need you to do this type of stuff," I knew that that was going to be something where I was spending a lot of nights and weekends, time away from my family, probably have to take days off of work to get it done, right? This is a high priority thing. I threw out a rate double the rate that I'm really happy to normally get. And he said, "Okay." And I was kind of amazed to see that happen. And I delivered, right? We got it done on time. It was with the quality they needed. I solved a very important problem for them that was at the top of the CEO's radar. Everybody's happy. They paid a nominal fee, got it done, and I kept getting business with them. So we talk about how to make that first step and how to avoid that first huge failure. And that there's all these other opportunities and all this information that you kind of need to make a good decision. On the other hand, though, you have to look at this level of comfort as well. So my friend Nick was working for a company, and he found out that they placed him someplace else because he was working at a couple different spots, and they placed him someplace else, and they were billing him out at $300 an hour. And he was like, because it was some very specialized mobile development that he knew how to do. And he goes, you know what? I'm fine with that. I'm comfortable with that, right? The company's taken a risk by doing that. If things don't pan out, the company that placed me there is the one who's on the line for that. And there were some problems with it, and they actually ended up having to eat some of the costs in there. It didn't work out as well as it happened, or as well as I wish. Business is not a reliable game. There's a lot of things that can happen. But he said, I was fine with that, right? I wasn't going to go back to them and say, you need to give me a bigger cut of that money. Because for this one area, they had a bigger risk. In other areas, when times were thinner, they were carrying him through as well, and he was always getting his paycheck. So there's kind of that risk and security that you have to take a look at. But once you go into a position, and even if you, on this first day, find out that, hey, I didn't negotiate well and the other guy is making more money, deal with it. Learn from it, make a better decision next time, have comfort when you need to have comfort with it. T&M or fixed bid. Time and materials or fixed bid. Has anybody ever done a side contract? Good. How did you bid it out? Did you bid it at a fixed bid, or did you go for time and materials?
I always try to do time and materials, but almost everybody insists on fixed bid because they want to know the cost up front.
They want to know the cost up front. Do they have all the specs up front, and do they know exactly what they want up front?
They've got a broad idea.
And when that happens, they're going to see what they want to see, and you're going to see what you want to see. And it doesn't end well, does it? Did you actually take the fixed bid project?
I have in the past, but they don't usually end well.
Did you make more on that project than you could have made at McDonald's for the same time period?
Probably not.
Yeah. If I call a shop and say, hey, I need an oil change, they do that all the time, right? They can give me a fixed bid on that. And if I had a BMW, they might not do as well on that gig because they realize that there's no drain plug on a BMW. You got to suck the oil out. You need special tools. The oil change is worth a little bit more, but a lot of times they'll fixed bid it. If I call them and say, this weird orange light's on my dash, is that the engine light? How much is that going to cost to fix? I don't know, you're going to have to bring it in, we're going to have to look at it. Well, I mean, it sounds like this. Listen, what is that? You've heard, I mean, you do engines, you know what that sounds like. You should be able to fix that, right? Nobody's going to take that. And even after they take a look at your engine and they run the diagnostics and they get the engine codes and they think they know what it is, they're still probably not going to fix bid that. They'll give you a better estimate because they know specifically what they need to do. But they're still going to tell you it's time and materials. I had our trunk on my wife's minivan wasn't working right. And they said, we don't know why it is. We're just going to keep on working on it. And we'll call you every time we get to this increment. So like every $200, they're calling me. Well, you want us to still look at it? But for software, they want it to be fixed bid. And the only way that can really work is if all the details, we're taking that waterfall approach, all the details are very well laid out and you can agree upon them. But there's so much interpretation to all those details anyways that it never really works. The only time I would recommend that you fix bid something is if you've done it 3 times, the exact same thing 3 times, and you know all the ins and outs. Otherwise, if you're going to take a fixed bid project, it might seem like it's going to be a lot of money, but it probably won't be. I had one project where the guy called me up and he gave me something, and it seems really simple. And he goes, dude, I don't care. If you want to just, just tell me it's $10,000 and we'll just do that. It's probably only going to be $2,000 or $3,000 worth of your time. And that's what I thought as well too. But I go, no, I haven't done this. Let me just do the time and materials on it. And I ended up making 15 grand off that because I kept giving him things and he kept discovering new stuff. And then as we were delivering it to the other people who were using it, they started wanting more things out of it, right? And at no point did I tire of him and go, man, you're cutting into my margins. I'm spending all this time, but I'm not going to be able to make any of that money back. We just had a reasonable rate, and we kept on working through it. I kept delivering him solutions, and he kept coming back and saying, hey, I like what we're doing. This is good. Let me get a little bit more. But you have to continuously deliver with that. Do you guys know Corey House at all? Speaker of Kansas City. I talked to him. I'm going to quote him a couple of times. We had a couple good conversations on this. Corey, like everybody else, is going to have the same story, right? First gig, they threw something out there. Corey was talking when he was out of college. Oh, yeah, I can do that with this. And he threw it out there without thinking, and all of a sudden realized it took so much more time. And again, you got bad relationships on both ends, and there's no future business in it because the first project did not work out that well. All right, so bill rate. So then we talk about pay rate. And the key here is it's nothing but net. So once you decide how you're going to get paid, when you get paid, you're kind of used to getting that. Most of us has had the full-time jobs. And, 1st and 15th, the check just drops in the mailbox. However, if you start to contract, or if you're with a new company that you're not familiar with, sometimes there's these payroll processes to go through. Sometimes they have some other things in there as well that you're not used to. I had one friend, John Von Gillern, who the first time he decided to work from home for a gig, he was super happy about it because it's a client out in California. He can just focus on his code. But then 2 months later, he had his first kid arrive, and he was running out of cash because he hadn't gotten paid yet. Because the company that he was working through said, we can't pay you because the client hasn't paid us yet. So this is, again, that area with risk. Right? The people are providing something, but usually the people who are providing those jobs, if they promise you that rate, they should deliver it. They're incurring the risk, they're making money from that. Sometimes they do great and sometimes they don't. The nothing but net talks about when you get paid. So a lot of times the company might have a net 30, which means I work on January 1st, and on February 1st, I give them an invoice, and on March 1st, I get paid for the work that I did on January 1st. So you got a lot of money that is not in your pocket yet. You've got cash flow issues. If you work for the auto industry, they have a net 90 standard payment. How'd you like to do that? You work through a weekend, make some extra money, want to take the kids and wife out for something, and then, well, maybe in 3 months I'll get the cash to do that. This can be a headache, and it also can start to hurt you because it can delay how quickly you can recognize problems. If you ever do any type of contract work, a lot of people tell you get half the money up front, and sometimes that might work. The other key, though, is, and this is something that I talk about in the Agile world a lot, fail fast. Find the problems quickly. What I've learned now is I will have a net 15, especially with new clients. I'll work 15 days with them, and I'll send them an invoice. And then I'll work 15 more days and send them the second invoice. If I haven't gotten paid for that first invoice at the end of the month, we stop work. All outstanding invoices are due immediately. I don't care what kind of problems you have. I don't care if it has to go through payroll and we have these things to sign off. We had an agreement. It's in the contract.
Are those calendar or business days?
Calendar. But that's a good question. You can actually state that in the contract too if you want to do business days. But yeah. So that's an annoyance, and you can also recognize early on what kind of problems you're going to have. And if you got a client and they're just not able to pay you, all right, worst case scenario, you've invested a month into it. Now, a month is still a month, right? A lot of us are kind of in that paycheck to paycheck range, and you have to ask yourself, if I lose 1 month of income, how many months before I can make that up? Right? Because the next month's income is going towards the things that I was already planning, and now I'm kind of behind the 8 ball on some stuff. So you got to kind of think about what kind of an impact is this really going to have on me in the long term. Work rate is another really interesting thing that sometimes is easy to overlook, especially if you're kind of an independent. When we think about the work that we're going to do, at a full-time position, there are a lot of people probably on your team, right? For larger companies, you're going to have a lot of specialized positions. At smaller companies, you're probably going to be doing a lot more of the work yourself. If you decide to do some side work, when you're looking at the project, you might be still thinking with your full-time brain to say what my portion is going to be. How much time is it going to take to write the code to solve this solution? What you don't necessarily think about is how much time does it take for me to talk to the client and find out what they want? How much time does it take for me to test the solution? Is the client going to test this for me? How much time does it take to invoice them, to keep track of my hours and submit the invoices? Or to be able to find the next client? How much time, and sometimes what I've found is that it's usually about 30% of the time I'm actually writing code. And it makes me feel kind of weird that I'm billing for all these other things. But sometimes you have to kind of wear that hat of project manager, of tester, of DevOps person, salesperson. You have to do all these things, and they take time. And if you only bill for the time that you're going to be writing code, make sure that you're billing enough for that. The other problem, too, is you get this feast and famine opportunity. Sometimes you have a lot of opportunities, and sometimes you don't. So when you wrap up one project, even if the bill rate was good, do you have that next thing lined up? Because most of the times they don't line up right on top of each other. You might have to wait a little bit. And sometimes the time that you have to wait grows and grows. And now you're sitting without income again. So how long do you wait until you can start getting that client? Or do you look for an alternate client? And then if you pick up client C, but client B comes around again and says, hey, we're finally ready to do that project that we wanted to do that you thought was going to be fun. Now you have to give it to somebody else. And then maybe my client C wraps up and I'm without a job again, and I say, hey, Kevin, can I have that work back? You can go sit and not have work for a little bit, but I want to have the income. So there's a lot of different risks that that start falling in there. Lee Brandt was talking about that, and he's run into that problem where he thinks, okay, do I want to backfill somebody else with this and then not have anything for myself? It's a balancing act. Brandon Carlson, a guy I work with, had talked about a scenario like that where he had some stuff coming in, but he didn't have anybody to do the work. So he added $50 per hour onto the bill rate, which is how much a year? 100 grand. And guess what? They said, okay. And now Brandon goes, I don't have anybody to do this work. In his case, he got lucky for that one scenario because the client took a look around and realized, wait a second, the more research we're doing, we just found out that our competitors are doing this and they're doing it a lot better than we are, or that we could, and there's really no margins in it, so they canceled the project. There's a lot of interesting things that you have to take a look at. And you've got that opportunity cost in there, right? What am I giving up today that's going to help me out tomorrow? How much time am I willing to put into something? If you've got this idea and you want to build your own product, you've got this startup in your head, and I might be doing 40 hours a week at my current job, but I've got this startup idea and I think it's going to be really good. How much time are you able to put into that? 10 hours a week? 10 hours a week isn't that much, right? 10 hours a week is 2 hours a night. Okay. That's 2 hours. In my case, I've got 4 kids. I've got a 16-year-old down to a 6-year-old. So 2 hours is when I finally get them to bed. And as a quick aside, Bose Quiet Comfort 25 noise canceling headphones. Highly recommend. But I'm only able to get the work done after they're quiet and asleep. So if that's 8 o'clock, that's great. I get 2 hours from 8 until 10, and then I can go to sleep and get a good night and wake up and go to my other job in the morning. If we have problems, now it's 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And I've already been working 8 hours at my regular gig, plus chasing them around to soccer and basketball practice. And now I'm going to spend 2 hours when I'm really tired and I just want to have a beer and watch Seinfeld. Okay, so let's just leave work nights alone and let's spend 10 hours on the weekend. All right, are we giving up Saturday? Or do you want to give up Sunday? Like, what are the other things that you want to do? One of my friends, he's single, and he just blew his engine up in his car because he was trying to do all this extra work, and he was used to being the guy who took care of changing his oil and everything, but he started adding those Saturdays and Sundays to doing this product work that he wanted to do, and he forgot the maintenance of his car. He lived on a dirt road. He beat the heck out of the car anyways. It was a WRX, a Subaru. He would do autocross, so he's insane. It was scary to drive with him. But he forgot to change the air filter. He lives on a dirt road. It was clogged. Burned up all the oil, and he blew his engine out. This is a 2012. It wasn't that old of a car. Yeah. That was a cost to him that he wasn't really expecting because he was focusing on these other areas. So that balance can really throw you off. I've had people that were going to do some subcontracting work for me. I had a client that needs some help, and I thought, hey, I'm going to let these guys help out. They're younger developers, give them a chance to have more experience. And then when they actually took a look at how much it really meant to invest 10 or 20 hours a week, it's a huge commitment. It's funny how much time we spend doing things for ourselves and kind of enjoying life sometimes. All right. So I said that first part was kind of the big chunk, right? Ooh. Did you hear that? You guys are old. All right, so security, right? So let's say we've, and again, contracting or full-time, we got the basics set up, we got money, we're getting paid on time, right? We're working the right amount of work. Now, if you have that kind of job, the next thing that you might be looking at is, I want to work at someplace secure. And that's kind of goes without saying for us. We're in a pretty comfortable place in our lives, and we don't always have to think about security quite as much. But sometimes you really have to ask yourself some of those questions. How can security cause me some major problems? And I'm talking about the kind of security that is going to cost you your job, your money, or your sanity, right? I mean, we're all going to deal with problems, but we're talking about security, things that are going to kind of erode at that base that we should be worried about. So the first level of security that we're going to talk about is technical security. So what am I talking about? Technical security. How can I have technical security problems with the job? If I'm not successful in what I do, I'm not able to prove that I'm worth what I'm worth. And full-time or part-time, I'm probably going to get fired, right? So the first thing I do, and I've got this in my contract, if I'm full-time or part-time, whatever I'm doing, I ask about what does my development environment look like? What is my hardware? If you're giving me an old laptop with a Pentium 2 processor, Windows XP, and an 80 gig spindle hard drive, and Visual Studio 2005 because it's free, I'm going to have a really hard time to succeed, right? I'm going to be selling myself as somebody who can do all these great things for you, and now you give me this hardware right off the bat that does not allow me to succeed. And is it their fault? No, it's my fault. Tools and automation, T&A. Do I have the infrastructure in place to do what I need to do? Does anybody use ReSharper? Can you live without it?
No, it's hard.
You ever get a new computer and install Visual Studio and start typing and wonder why nothing works? You're like, oh yeah, I need ReSharper. Because there's just this muscle memory that we're used to that allows us to solve problems quickly, that we're not thinking about what we're doing, we're just flowing through it. If I don't have access, admin rights on my box to install the tools I want, or they won't allow me to have an admin do it. That's a big red flag for me because that's really going to slow me down and it's going to cause me a lot of headaches as I'm thinking too much about the things that I don't want to have to think about. Automation. How's that code getting into production? How are those database changes occurring in production? I think for most of us who've been around for a while, anybody ever have to update a production database? Anybody forget the where clause? You're lying. I remember seeing somebody show me a query. Hey, Dustin, is this good? Yep, that looks good. What I didn't realize is he was doing a bunch of unions. It was like, I don't remember how many lines of code it was, but I just saw the little window and I was like, yeah, that's fine. Well, he ran it, he pulled down the server because it just locked everything up. He was running everything under a transaction. Or somebody else who shows the code and they're like, yep, here's what we're going to do. We're going to delete this record where person ID equals 539. All right, cool. And then they highlighted it except for the where clause and ran it. I don't want that to happen. I can lose my job over that kind of stuff, right? That's automation security where they're giving you too much to hurt yourself. So I look at that and I try to ask, okay, if you don't have these things in place, will you give me the time to put those things in place? Because I don't want to have to crawl out underneath this. I don't want to have to see if your database backup strategy really works. Right? These are things that we've all gone through, but we do not want to have to worry about it. I don't want to have to manually deploy code. Let me commit it and set up some sort of build process which will automatically do that. So it happens the same way every single time, and I don't have to worry about changing that connection string where all of a sudden the production website has been going against a test database for 3 days, and the database for which you were throwing a bunch of funny data in there because you're a funny guy and you're having fun while you're writing code and you're making up all these silly names that are now showing up on the production website. Nobody else did that, just me? Yeah. And then brownfield development. That is probably one of the biggest risks that I've run into that can cause some major problems. And when you go in there, they're going to talk to you about this shed app they've got, and they say, hey, this shed's good. You know, it's been using it for quite a few years, but it's got the shovels in there. We got all the items in there that you need, all the tools. And you say, okay, yeah, I could probably do that. And then you get to that, and you're like, what? It reminds me of Indiana Jones. All right, so as a quick aside, this is actually my father-in-law's garage. And the funny thing is his last name was Brown. So you see that, and I mean, seriously, think about the security of working in this. I had a side client one time. My buddy Andy goes, Dustin, I got this VB.NET project for you. I don't know VB.NET. Andy knows C#. I'm like, really? You can't figure out VB.NET? So he gave it to me, and then I realized why he gave it to me. Because it was a website, and it had the stored proc. Because it was a small shop, and they had one guy who was taking care of server admin work. He was doing the software development. He was setting up the databases. He was doing all this stuff, and he heard just enough buzzwords to put things together in a really, really bad way. Why do we like stored procs? Work on the server, and they're compiled. So they're fast. Fast is good. I'm going to use stored procs. And everybody's doing XML nowadays, right? So let's use some XML. So he had the stored proc, which you would supply it XML, and then based on the XML that you gave it, it would return you XML. And that was used for the entire site. The stored proc was one stored procedure. Just whatever XML you give it, it'll give you some other XML back. And there's no serialization going on. This is XML string parsing stuff. What's that? So that's what I had to work on. And I thought, this is not something that I can do for 2 hours a night when my kids go to bed. I had to take time off from my other job to go there and load this into my head. load this mental map of all the things, of all the places that I have to make sure I don't make a mistake, because they didn't have the environment set up where I was going to be able to test this. They just said, well, they did have a test environment, which is good, but then they had prod, but there was no coverage. So if I made a mistake, there was really no way to catch it, and nobody was testing either. So when I saw that, I saw a little bit of it, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I got time for this. I'm like, well, if it's a matter of money, we can give you more money. I'm like, yeah, and I bumped up my rate 25% thinking I was so smart. And then I realized, no, I'm not that smart because I'm taking time away from another job to do this work. So that client's not going to be as happy. And now for all this extra headache, I'm making an extra 25%, a couple $100 a week. It really wasn't worth it. So I finally had to walk away with that. And most of us would take a look at that and probably just say, raise it. Blow it away, start fresh, right? And my father-in-law is 75 years old. So I'm thinking, this is probably going to be my responsibility someday. And I might just want to burn the whole thing down and build another garage. Although the truth is, the guy runs, he medaled 32 times last year in 5Ks. At 75 years old. I ran one 5K in the last 5 years. So I could. And, you know, but when he goes through it, it all makes sense. Yeah, here's where we keep the shovels. You know, there's a car seat for safety, obviously. The vacuum has obviously never been taken out of the box. And if we were to just torch this, because at a glance, nothing really seems of value, we could torch it and build a brand new garage and be happy until, if you can see way in the back up there, there's some gloves that are hanging up on the wall. So I'm 40 years old. When my father-in-law was, I can't remember if it was 36 or 38, he was still Golden Gloves boxing. He got to go to nationals and did road work with Muhammad Ali. That is very valuable, right? And just like the applications that we have to overtake, there's a lot of value in them that we might not see. So if I blow this away, or if I throw that application away and start fresh, the people who are using that application are going to see things that they really valued and they need back. And now you're going to have to try to figure out how to restore that. So one of the things that I've learned is to take an evolution over revolution approach. Continue to evolve. Find the things that are the most painful to you and get them out of the way so they're not going to hurt you anymore. So if I were to do that, I probably would build some shelves in here so at least I can move the piles multiple levels and still be able to walk through and recognize that when I'm coming in and out, I'm working on this shelf, this is the area, we'll clean this up and we'll get to the other areas as we go. Is it cheaper? No. But it is more stable and it's going to protect you from having that major problem of throwing stuff away and thinking that you can rebuild it quickly because, hey, we're developers and we develop and we're really good and we know what we're doing. Where you realize that you're not giving the people what they want. Sometimes it works. My friend Brandon Weber walked into a project and they were working on it for 9 months and they hadn't really delivered anything. And he realized that that team really didn't know the technology that they're working on. They're doing MVC and it was clearly their first MVC app. He blew it away and was able to rewrite everything they had done in 3 weeks and the client was happy. This was an external vendor that had come in. If you come in and you throw away an application that was built in-house, you're signing your own exit ticket. Not because you're doing the right thing, because you just told somebody their baby is ugly. There are other developers who are working at that company who have their livelihoods, right? And now if you're spreading the word that they don't know what they're doing and they're doing bad work, you best believe that's going to come back around to you. I don't care if you're a contractor or full-time employee. Gerald Weinberg in The Art of Consulting recommends don't promise more than 10% change. Find the biggest problems, deal with those, and then move on to the next problems. Continue to make improvements. There are things that I can do in this garage to help it out without telling my father-in-law that he is a total slob. right? I can make little improvements as we go, and you're going to have people happier along the way. But if you come in and you're headstrong and you say, I know the code, this is bad, you're dumb, I'm smart, those things are going to come back to bite you. And trust me, I've seen people lose their jobs over that because of some of those problems. All right. So those are some technical problems. Now we were just talking about the people problems, right? So there's going to be people problems at the places you work, and these can be hard to find. This is where coming to events like this and talking to other people and finding out what's going on in the other places that they work is extremely beneficial if you're looking for another job at some point, because you have an idea of who works at these other companies and who are the people that you're going to work with. I think a lot of us have worked at the companies that have had bad management. The fear-driven development. Has anybody been threatened with their job if they don't get the project done or the feature done by Saturday or by the end of the month? That doesn't really make you want to work that often. You're going to do it because you're threatening somebody with their job. If you have people who are doing that, they are not very good at their job, right? They're compensating for some problems in other areas. There's planning that should have taken place a long time ago, but they're worried about looking bad, so they're going to put all the weight on your shoulders, just as you were going to do to the QA shoulders when you meet your Saturday night deadline and give them the pile of junk that they have to test, right? It flows downhill. But having that fear-driven development is a very serious problem that a lot of people have run into, and it's hard to identify. Future doghouse designation, and yes, I was just trying to be creative with all the different FDD acronyms. Future doghouse designation is that recognition that as hard as you might be working on something, they're eventually going to blame you for everything, especially if you leave. Because the beauty is once you leave or once you switch teams, all of the problems that that team had were attributed to you. And that might not seem like a big deal until you start thinking about reputations, right? If something goes wrong and a process crashes on a Saturday night and they go, you know what, Matt did it, I think, and then they find out later on, no, actually it wasn't Matt, it was Brian. That doesn't matter. Matt's reputation's already been tarnished. People have a bad emotional feeling for that. That's why these political ads work so well. They can have the worst sayings out there, they can have utter lies, and people don't remember the facts, they remember the feelings. And whether or not Matt actually made all those mistakes, we know he did. When we hear his name, we're still going to have that bad feeling associated with him, and that is going to be something that kind of carries with him that might make it difficult for these other positions inside the company. That future doghouse designation, if you see the way people place blame, if they're looking for root causing a problem or just blaming somebody, you can run into that issue. It's hard to identify, but it's tough. The friend-developed doghouse. This is kind of one of my favorite. This actually happened to me. Now, it wasn't actually doghouse, but see, Kevin. So I had a client reach out, and they said, hey, I need some help. I got this doghouse here, right? It wasn't really a doghouse, but it's just a story. It's only $42. My buddy made it for me. We've known each other since high school. He's a genius. All that computer stuff. And it's a good doghouse. It does what I need, but I need a couple of changes, and that's where I'm reaching out to you. So we want a second floor on it, and just kind of clean it up a little bit, right? Now I told you the other part was only $42, so it probably shouldn't be more than another $42, right? This level set of expectations is so far off. So I had that situation. And I thought, okay, well, let me see what I can do to work with you. But when you have those constraints, that's your inevitability. Technically, yeah, we did add some paint to it and we got the second level. But just with your point with the fixed bidding, nobody's really happy with that. So this was a case where I had had been working with the client, and I don't think that they really understood what that iron triangle was all about, right? You can have it cheap, you can have it good, you can have it fast, pick two. He had these preconceived notions in his head, so I said, I'm not going to be able to do that for you. But I see that you've had 2 other people take a stab at this, and then they just left it. It was a classic ASP website. Somebody else started doing some PHP work in there, and then they just left it. I said, tell you what, I got these 2 students that I had taught at the community college. They need some experience. Let's see if we can get them working on it. And they were going to work for a lower rate, but they were going to be building experience, so they were happy. 10 hours a week shouldn't be that much. After a couple months, one of them goes, you know what, I was wrong. I can't do this 10 hours a week. It's a lot harder than I thought. So he bowed out, and the other guy was working on it, and then he finally got to the point, too, where he realized he can't do it. So I tell the client, all right, look, told you I would help you out on here. Here's my rate. I'll give you a discount. Let's just get this done. So continue to work on it, and you do the best with what you have. And I'll finish that story here, but you can kind of see where this is going. So now we have these legal security issues. Lee Brandt talks about contracts. He goes, I'll never do business with somebody that I wouldn't do with a handshake. And I go, oh, so you work without contracts? He goes, God, no. But if I can't shake a guy's hand and look him in the eye and say, I think we can do business together, it doesn't matter what kind of contract we have. A contract is only as good as your willingness to enforce it. And even at that point, it's a tremendous amount of work. So with this client, I got all these things done. I'd invested over 200 hours on this already. Nights and weekends, remember the opportunity cost we talked about earlier? And I finally got it working, and I released it to him. And I said, all right, can you test this stuff out? And he goes, yeah. So he finally started testing it, and then a few days later he goes, hey, Dustin, one of my employees said that they can log in from home. I thought we were only supposed to allow people to log into this app from work. And I said, you're right. My bad, let me get that. It was configuration setting. Since we didn't have all the tools in place, I was doing things manually. And guess what? I was testing it from home, which I'm on a different IP address, so I commented out the config setting. Anybody ever done the same kind of thing? Am I the only one? Am I the dumbest guy in the room? He calls his buddy up, and his buddy goes, what? He did that? You need to fire him. He doesn't know what he's doing. So the guy calls me back, and he's like, forget about it. We're done. Wouldn't give me a chance to fix the problem, to basically uncomment that config setting that says, lock on this IP range. And then I realized, okay, great. I've got all this time involved with it. We went through a complete site redesign. I hired a designer, which I paid out of my own pocket. And I was thinking, you know what? I haven't given you anything yet. This was before I really kind of embraced Agile. I haven't given you anything yet, so I'm going to have you pay me when I have something for you. I'm not just going to have you pay me while I'm working because there's nothing for you to see. So, got that problem there. And finally I decided, I need to get some money out of this. So I had enlisted the help of my friends. I decided to sue the guy, and we just decided to go to a small claims court. I figured $5,000 cap, no lawyers, just make it simple. Well, he decided to bring a lawyer. I brought a couple of my friends as witnesses, and the judge basically said, we went through a full day of arbitration, and the judge says, well, here's the deal. Actually, he was the arbitrator, but he is a judge. He's just in the role of arbitrator. He goes, I'm the most technologically advanced judge on the bench here because I have an iPad. Because I don't understand all this technology stuff. And I didn't have a contract with him because the guy reminded me of my dad, and he had the same kind of values. And I said, hey, we can trust each other. But I did have all the documents when we had these conversations, and I said, it's going to take this much more time at this rate, which is as good of a contract. But now I realize I'm going to have to spend so much more time trying to recover that. His genius buddy from high school set up one box in the basement of his restaurant, which was connected to the modem, which contained the public website, the internal website, the database, and all of his financial records. Yeah. The guy that I brought to court with me, who was going to testify or kind of be my witness, if you will, had done some work with him and saw that himself. My buddy is credentialed to testify on behalf of the U.S. government in the U.S. Supreme Court. He knows his stuff. The other guy was one of the junior developers. Both these guys took a day off from work to help me out, only to realize arbitration isn't going to work. We might have to actually take this to court, which is going to take 2 or 3 days, and then probably have a bench ruling on a topic that they don't really know anything about. So I started looking at some of these sunk costs. Like, how much am I willing to lose here? Remember the opportunity costs? I get paid by the hour. So I'm taking 2 days away from another client to try to recover money from this client. Plus, I'm asking my friends to take time off as well. It starts adding up pretty quick. How much are you willing to invest into something to go after it, or how much are you willing to just walk away from it? We ended up settling that day when I realized that this is just going to cost too much money to go after. I made enough money to cover my out-of-pocket expenses and a really good reason to complain about things to you. When you're looking at some of those legal things, nobody wants to think about their exit strategy. Right? So maybe you're thinking about the job that you want to do and you want to set up the contract, but nobody really wants to read the contract. Nobody wants to think about what their exit strategy is. But in these situations, if you're doing any type of side work, you have to think about the contract. You have to think about your exit strategy. What happens if you get sued? Do you have the proper insurance coverage? Do you have a corporation set up so the corporation can go bankrupt, but it's not going to affect your spouse? If you screw something up because you're trying to work on a small company and you accidentally delete their database, their production database, which they have, I mean, if they're going to give you access to the production database, they're probably not doing a good job of making backups anyways, right? So these are things that we don't really want to think about. And these are things that can happen in our full-time jobs as well. But it's a good thing to keep that in mind, to say, let's make sure that I don't make this failure myself. All right, so remember I said about the lower tiers, they're so big and they're going to hold the majority of the content for the meeting here. All right. So now we're kind of getting into the belonging stage, right? We got our nice picture of friends here. So I may take a job because my friends work there, because I want to work with good people. The money's there, financial problem solved. I'm not worried about losing my job. I think I can stay there for a while. So now I want to work with friends. So what can be bad about that? Well, there are different failures you can have with friends. You might be on a really good team, but if you bring your friend in, are they going to be on the same team with you? Is that a good thing? You ever have a really good friend and then decide to go on a vacation with them? And then you're not your good friends anymore? Is that friend going to get put on a different team that doesn't have as cool of a manager as you do? Are you going to be working with people who are going to be jealous of you? And that might seem to be kind of funny. Like, why could that happen? But I worked at one client, and one of the guys next to me, we'll call him Chi, because that's his name. Chi was always having these quips. Oh, you contractors, you make so much money. Oh, you're making too much money. You know, and after hearing that enough time, I said, all right, Chi, how much extra per hour would you charge so that this company can fire you at any time? They don't have to go through HR. They don't have to give the process improvement plan. You're out. Oh, you. No, seriously, how much would you charge for that? And if you do get fired, right, how much extra do you need per hour to kind of build up your bankroll so you have enough in savings to find an extra job or to find your next job? And where are you going to find that next job? Do you know where to look? Are you going to be able to find something that's going to take care of those first 2 levels of Maslow's hierarchy that we talked about? Who are the first 3 people you're going to call? How much extra do you want to get paid for taking a Thursday night off on a really nice evening and come to a user group to learn about stuff and to network with people just to see what you might learn? So you can go back and understand what people at different companies are doing and make sure that, hey, I need to work on this skill set because it sounds like this is what people are using. How much extra do you want to get paid for being the person that people want and need? I don't think he liked that talk too much. So he might have been a little bit jealous, but I thought, maybe if she took better care of herself, got some better shoes and didn't have that frumpy dress, right? Yes, I am mean. People problems. You. Lee Brandt talked about all the fun of the blame game, all the politics that goes on in an organization. The teaming up, the ops guys complaining about the software guys and sitting at the meeting table and yelling at each other and pointing fingers. You guys broke the website. No. This code's fine. It worked fine on my machine. Your hardware is garbage. And they keep going back and forth. And Lee Brandt says, whenever I see that, I stand up and says, me. My fault. I go, Lee, you're not even on this project. Nope. My fault. I'm taking the responsibility for it. And people are confused. And Lee says, now, what are we going to do to fix this? How are we going to solve this and move forward? Like I said before, sometimes it's a bad thing to be the scapegoat, and sometimes you just step up and take it and move forward. And when you do those things enough time, people know. It doesn't really matter where the blame game goes. Leave it alone. That you're looking in the past, look to the future, keep improving things, keep moving forward. Like I said, people are going to remember emotion, not facts. But when you do those types of things, regardless of who takes credit for it, the people who really need to know will know. And maybe you just get sick of all that and you say, I don't want to deal with people anymore. People suck. So you decide to work from home. Perfect, right? Corey House was telling me his favorite story about this. The first gig he had, he's working from home and he's loving it and he's in his boxers and he's watching movies and all of a sudden he looks down and he realized he just sent the same email 32 times to every one of the clients for the legal firm he was working on. And he asked himself, how did this happen? And he realized that he wasn't acting like a professional. He was doing things at home that he would not have done in the office. And it's really easy to take this working from home approach and getting really comfortable with it, but you have to have that same level of professionalism that you do in an office. You got to set your hours. You can't just keep working because you're going to burn yourself out if you keep walking by that computer. Have the place that you go in at 7 o'clock, leave at 6, shut the door, let it go. But when you start mixing your worlds together, this work life and personal life, you're going to keep getting closer and closer to enjoying this personal life because that's fun. That's the life that we like. We might enjoy the jobs that we have, but we really like our personal lives. And once you start crossing into that too much, you start making these really stupid mistakes that you might not normally have done. And in the case of sending 32 emails to all the clients of a law firm, now we're getting down into that security, that losing job and getting sued type of approach. He got lucky from it. But, if you can have control over that, I've got a lot of friends that do that. They love it. They're spending more time with the family, having a better diet. One of the only other downsides of having this working from home approach is that out of sight, out of mind. There's always a lot of value in having face-to-face communications. And when people don't see you, they forget about you. You're not involved in certain communications. You're not involved with what's going on right now, and you can start to find yourself on the outs. So kind of recognize that if you decide to take that approach, be smart about it. All right. So we're getting close to the end here. So confidence. This is kind of one of the fun areas. So I've had friends take jobs because they want to either leverage the confidence that they have or they want to build up on their confidence. And what could come bad from building up confidence, right? Building up your tool set, learning more. Heartland Developer Conference used to actually be a a rotating conference. Anybody know that? Yeah, the first time they had it, actually I was able to make it to the second year. I didn't hear about the first year. The second year was in Des Moines, and it was like across the street from my office. We signed up the morning of. And then I think the next year they had it in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I remember going there, and they were talking about Visual Studio 2005. And they took the database, and they dropped it on the web page. And it built the views. I got the edit controllers. I got all my validation scripts. It told me if my username was more than 40 characters. It had all this stuff, and it generated the database. And I was like, oh my God, I need to learn this tool, and I need to get out there and build a bunch of websites for companies before everybody else finds out how easy programming is. So I took on a client, and I was learning a lot. And I thought, code generators. I learned about CodeSmith. Oh my God, I can write code that writes code. I don't even have to think anymore. It just spits it out for me. All I got to do is design a database table, and boom, all the work is there. This is genius. And every time I did that, I was learning more about it, but I kept finding these other things that didn't quite work out. And every good programmer I know has gone through that framework or code generation phase in their life where they go, hey, if I just do this, I've got all the moving pieces in my head. I can write something that'll spit all that out. I mean, the JavaScript world's going through the same thing, right? Just follow this framework and it will solve all your problems. Well, the same problems that the JavaScript world's going through, I went through that same headache myself. And I remember I'd actually taken a week off from work to say, I just need more focused time. But I had my second kid who was newborn, and I knew I needed to spend some time with him and let my wife off. So I had him on the floor, and he's in his carrier, and I'm rocking him back and forth, and he's happy. And I'm all caffeinated up, and I'm writing code, and I'm going to make this code generator work. So I've got my headphones on, and I'm rocking out, and Dave's rocking out, and he's happy, and I'm happy. And Mama came in, and Mama wasn't happy. And I invested all this time into doing these things. And I was like, I can do this. And then I realized I can't. And I had nothing to deliver. And I had all that time wasted. And my wife was not happy with me at all. And I was at my second job, which was the kind of place where they don't have a whole lot of developers and you have to do everything. And you don't have a lot of security around you. So I'm worried about my job. And I'm putting in 50, 70 hours a week there, plus this other stuff. And I've got failure all over the place. Now, eventually, though, through all of that pain, I built up my toolbox. And I left the company that was really bad for me, and I went to another company that was bad for me. But I didn't have to work. No, it was the next company I went to was great. And guess what? I have a toolbox full of failures. So when the other people are starting to try to use these tools and going through the same mindsets I was going through, I was able to say, okay, just don't forget about that one thing over there. Or are you sure about this? Well, what about this scenario? And all of a sudden now I'm providing more value to the company because I have a bigger tool set. And I'm starting to get promotions and starting to get some raises. And all of a sudden my wife is starting to see that, hey, this is starting to work for us. Investing your time in building up your toolbox has been helpful, even though it was really painful at the time. And that can build up some confidence, but then you can get to that level of epistemic arrogance. And can you think of a better person than Kanye West for that? Well, actually, I can think of one, but we're not going to have political conversations tonight. So Brandon Carlson, who you heard me talking about earlier tonight, told me about the biggest failure he had with epistemic arrogance. Brandon Carlson's an agilist. His first project was at a bank where they said, hey, we've got this major thing that we need to get done, and we have to get it done by this date. We want to try this agile thing out. So Brandon said, all right, give me 5 developers who want to learn COBOL and want to learn test-driven development and give us a shot. So they asked around and they found 5 COBOL developers who wanted to learn Java and wanted to learn test-driven development, and they got their pod area and they got the project done ahead of schedule with surprisingly low number of defects. So obviously the answer is, we must agile all the things. So they spun up 6 teams, and they all failed. And then they said, agile sucks. We're not doing agile anymore. And Brandon couldn't understand it. He's like, what was it? And he realized he was full of epistemic arrogance. You know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. He realized that it wasn't agile that made those projects succeed. The reason the project succeeded is because he had five highly motivated individuals that were willing to learn and willing to work. And the other 6 teams were, all right, you guys are going to do this agile thing, so go over there, and we're going to be doing stories and Scrum and all this other fun stuff. And you're like, why? I like working over here. And they failed. And this is a very, very difficult one to avoid. But when you start getting confidence, it's very easy to think that the confidence that has taken me this far is the confidence that will take me even further. And you can get in front of yourself with that. Or you get people who are so headstrong that they start having these stupid discussions about that's not how you agile. I saw a couple of grown men yelling at each other about how you're supposed to best agile things. What is that about? You're here to solve problems. Don't get caught up in some of those details. People get fired over that stuff because I don't care how good you are, eventually, if you're doing that kind of garbage, you're causing more headache than the value you're bringing. And you're pulling morale down, and you're going to have those problems. I had another guy join my team. And he came up, and on the first day, he's gone, oh, well, normally with Agile, you're supposed to do this, and you're supposed to do these kinds of things. And the rest of the team was like, oh, you're just calling our baby ugly. And a really important lesson that was reaffirmed from that is my belief that you've got 5 I/O devices on your head. All right? You got 2 eyes and 2 ears and a mouth. So try to use those in the same relation. When I walk into a place, I don't just start talking about everything that I see. I let it absorb a little bit. I listen to what people are saying and I think about it. I listen to the managers saying, oh yeah, and we do this, and we have the bonuses tied to their sprint commitments, and we're doing this. And then later on, they talk about some of the problems. I don't understand why developers don't want to commit to anything. They're always delivering twice what they commit to, but they'll never commit to that. Are there any negative repercussions if they don't meet their sprint commitments? Well, I guess they might lose their bonus. And with the guy who was talking about our Agile board, 2 weeks later, after he shut his mouth and actually watched what we were doing, he goes, oh, I get it. Because he realized that we weren't doing it the same way, because we'd been doing it long enough. And we were getting rid of wasteful processes, and we were doing things that was valuable to our team. So even though it didn't look like the same boards that he's looked at before, or even what the other side of the room had, it worked for us. And just because he had a lot of experience and he was used to walking into other organizations where he might have been the most agile person on the team, that didn't necessarily mean he was here. Nor was everybody going to stand up and say, hey, I'm more agile than you. No, it doesn't happen. Some people just sit back and like, all right, you want to act like a goofball? Go ahead. And it's been surprising how many times I've seen people take this approach, where you end up burning bridges because you're really good at what you do, but nobody wants to work with you. All right, so we're getting close to wrapping it up here. So now we're talking about self-actualization, right? This is the pinnacle. In our world, there are very few people who are able to kind of be in the self-actualization level. I mean, to really feel like I am doing everything I can with what I have. There's a lot of people that are still really focusing on these lower level, I need to make money, I need to take care of my family, and I don't have any time to worry about myself, right? This is kind of like that Kardashian level. In the world that I've seen in our area here, self-actualization means I have all these talents, I have all these ideas, I'm going to go forth and try to create something of my own. I want to start my own business. I want to start my own product, right? And a lot of people have had that view, if you build it, they will come. I've known quite a few developers who take a look at problems in their day-to-day life, maybe at work, and they go, hey, I can write something better for that. John Von Gillern had created a couple of really cool applications that would analyze your tools or analyze your code so you could write link queries against your code to say, give me all the methods that have a cyclomatic complexity greater than 20. Give me all the methods that have 3 nested loops or that have more than 9 lines of code. Kind of a cool thing. And he goes, at the level that he was at, he really wanted to be able to look through the code and find things out. He had another thing which would analyze all the code and show mappings to show how complex it is and how many different communication structures to show what the weakest parts of the code are. And he had this idea that I'm going to sell this product. What he didn't realize is that, if you build it, they will come doesn't really work because you need a team of salespeople. Anybody ever hear of Telerik or DevExpress? They have some tools, but they have massive sales staffs. Hansel Minutes, .NET Rocks, all those podcasts, they're paying money for that so you can hear about that. If you don't hear about these tools, you're not going to use them. I had one friend who created a website called Event Dogs, and his idea was he wants to make a website where people could host tournaments because he thought it'd be really cool to just enter the information you need for a foosball tournament or a dart tournament. He thought there was a market for that. So he built that. And then he started trying to roll it out and trying to go on the sales approach because he did the development first because developers develop, that's what we do, right? And he started realizing that he was completely wrong. So he learned some things about the foosball world. Does anybody like foosball? Just me? I love foosball. He learned things about the foosball world that he realized this is not a market I'm going to do any business in. They don't want a website that's going to handle this. They just want somebody to do it. So apparently, foosball is a quick game, right? And they've got these tournaments, and I don't know what you can make a couple $100 to win them or whatever. But he realized that the people who were showing up to him weren't the people who have a whole lot of disposable income that were going to be paying for his website. He also realized that over time, your twitch reflex gets slower. So the people who enjoyed going to these foosball tournaments would turn to performance-enhancing drugs. Meth. So they would do more meth so they could play more foosball so they could make a couple $100, and then they would do more meth, and they would follow that path until they were just fried out and they couldn't play foos anymore. And he goes, oh my God, I could have failed so much faster for so much less money. And I had another friend who had learned from some of these experiences, and he was a developer, but he started up a company called Men's Style Lab, which is kind of like a trunk club, and he spent 60 hours in technology. 60 hours building the website and the minimum framework necessary. He took the lean startup approach. And he was one of the only friends that I've seen who had taken that approach, who had gone into creating a company without dumping a lot of time into technology, the thing that he was the most comfortable with. So like I said, in the .NET user group, we can make fun of all the Java developers, because Java developers see every problem, they want to solve it in Java. And the JavaScript developers look at everything and said, oh, you don't even need C#. Do that all in Node.js, man. And we can make those jokes. But we're all kind of in the same umbrella because when we see a problem, we can code our way out of that problem, right? And it's really hard to see that and not kind of walk away and go, what's a simpler approach for this? So when you start to get to that level, it's a good time for you to go back to that tool set that you've developed over all these years and realize that maybe we don't keep using all those same tools. Maybe we take time to start showing other people how to use the tools that we've accumulated and let them start using the tools. And maybe we start taking a look at some of the tools that we never looked at before. One of my friends had a startup. They got to a point where they were up to 12 full-time people. They had millions of dollars in revenue and in venture capitalists. And then after about 3 years, it was back down to him and the founder. And he was still doing the coding thing. He was building the website and building all the things, but the business just didn't take off the way that he thought it would. They weren't getting the sales. They weren't getting this funding that they were expecting. So he started kind of having a little bit more free time on his hand. And he decided to go out with his business partner because he figured, well, I focused on software development the entire time that we ran this company because I'm a developer. And I'm going to hang out with a guy and go to one of his sales meetings. And he went with him to the sales meeting because somebody that the guy had been talking to for 3 years, and realized that that guy was not doing a good job. The people that they were visiting didn't even know who they were, even though this guy had been talking to them for 3 years. And my friend recognized that you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes it's really comfortable to stick in the areas that we know well. But to venture into the sales side of things, or the marketing side of things, there's people skills involved with it. I don't want to do that. I can handle everything on my keyboard. And then he got in there and he goes, this wasn't really that hard. It wasn't that hard to actually convey what it is that we do and what it is that we want. But his business partner, who he just blindly trusted, didn't have those skills either. So sometimes when you start getting to self-actualization, that might be a good time to just revisit the skills that you haven't built up and ask yourself, why not? You guys all know Corey House, right? Well, a lot of you know Corey House. Corey House is a famous speaker now. Corey House is an international speaker. He gets paid to go to NDC London. He's been on all the podcasts multiple times. He's just some dude down in Kansas City. Some dude who is a developer that said, I need to work on my public speaking skills because I'm really bad at them. And then he focused on that. And he got better and better. And all of a sudden, he's somebody that fills up rooms. Wherever he speaks, he will fill the room up. Matthew Renzi is another guy who he's from Des Moines, and he's really into data analytics. And he's also friends with Corey House, and he started doing the same thing. A year ago, he's talking to me about, I'm really going to focus on this speaking thing, and I want to do these Pluralsight courses because I can make over $100,000 a year off Pluralsight courses. That's passive revenue. And he dedicated himself to that, and he built up a bunch of new skill sets, and now he's also in the same boat, where he's getting invited to speak every weekend at different places and flies around the world to give talks, right? These are all things that we can do. We just have to tell ourselves, hey, not to get all Tony Robbins on you, but go out and give them a try and see what you can do, and fail from them. That's cool. I used some new skills at a company one time where I noticed that the manager and all the employees were really freaking out. And they were always stressed out because we've got too much to do and we're never going to get this stuff done. And yet somehow one of the developers still had enough time to spend 2 weeks writing a 20-page dissertation about why he thought the Active Directory infrastructure we were using was wrong. He didn't like our Active Directory setup. So instead of actually solving problems, he was working on that. So I got the developers together and we wrote down everything that we could think of on note cards. And then we put them in the manager's office because they wouldn't give me any money to buy a Kanban board. I couldn't put them on the wall because, well, what if the clients come through and they see that mess? So we put everything on the wall and we organized it in priority. And now my manager every morning could see what people are working on. And she goes, oh, why are we still working on this thing? We've been on that for 3 days. Well, I was doing this. No, but you're supposed to be working on that. Can you just finish that up, please? Okay. And all of a sudden, you've got visibility. And it was a really simple thing. And I thought, what can we do to solve this? So I just implemented my first team board. And it was helpful, right? Just some creativity. So it's a different level of creativity. One of the other teams saw that. And they wanted to use this online board because I was using this website called Kanbanry. And the guy came over. He goes, yeah, can we do that? But I want it on a computer because, we're a technical company. It's like, you don't need it. But he finally got on the computer because he thought it would help his team. And then he goes, hey, Dustin, how much would it take for you to write this website? That? They've got drag and drop in JavaScript. They got a lot of really good things going on. Like, that's like $20,000 at least of development, probably closer to $50,000 or $100,000 of development that went into that. I'm like, why? As well, you have to pay for it. Okay, well, it's like $5 a user per month. Well, yeah, you got 3 people on your team, don't you? So he ended up doing this. He put all the work on there, and then the people would come over, so he only paid for the 1 license. And they would tell him, okay, I'm ready to work on the next one, boss. Hey, save the company $10 a month, right? So with this self-actualization, you start finding a lot of different opportunities out there and a lot of things where you can contribute your skill sets and build up more skills. A couple of years ago, I did some self-assessment, and I realized that I was involved with 6 501c3s. And it's because there's a lot of really cool things going on, right? The user groups, this takes time, but this is a really cool thing to be involved with. And by the way, Brian and Matt, thank you. Seriously, this is, he brought his daughters with, thankfully. I think those are your daughters. I hope so.
They were outside.
They're cute, but, so that's why I was kind of confused. They don't.
You don't know my wife.
I had another opportunity where somebody reached out to me and they said, hey, we're starting up this program where we want to teach homeless people how to program. Because maybe they can develop some iPhone apps and work their way out of poverty. I'm like, how do you say no to that, right? I had some people go, hey, we're looking at starting this thing called DSM Hack. It's a charity event. It's going to be a 2-day hackathon where developers come in and they write code to solve nonprofits' problems. So if a nonprofit has an issue and they say, we're doing this process manually paper, we'll throw a small team of developers at it. In 2 days, they'll fix that problem and make their lives easier. How do you say no to that? And the same thing with the reason that goes back to my daughter here is because she wanted to help me go in shopping. So I said, okay, hold the eggs. So she held the eggs and she asked for more. So I said, here's the V8. Here's the salads. And she just kept taking on as much as she could because every time that she was helping out, she felt good. And it's really easy for us to kind of overcommit to that level where we have a lot more coming on us that we realize, maybe I'm doing too much. And I'm assuming a lot of us have kind of gone through that same, ebb and flow where you realize that you're overcommitting, you're doing too much, and that you're kind of spreading yourself too thin versus, having too much free time on your hands. So, all right. So that's it. And so a lot of people that had helped out with this talk, like I said, I didn't name everybody by name. I didn't want it to be a big old name dropping event, but a lot of people have contributed to this. There's many other stories and things that I've learned through the years. Again, just talking with people like you and learning from each other's failures. So go forth and fail. Thank you.